Hello there, good evening and welcome to Lincoln City's pre-match show Matchday Live. The Imps hosting Gillingham at the LNER Stadium, looking of course to bounce back from that disappointing defeat against Rochdale on Saturday. Got another jam-packed show coming up for you this evening. We'll be speaking to the captain, Liam Bridcut. We'll also be speaking live to Sean Rowan, and we'll have team news for you and all the reaction to it just after 6 o'clock this evening. Will the captain be in the starting 11 this evening? Do stay with us to find out. Let's bring Gary Hutchinson into the fold then. Gary, lovely to see you. A disappointing week it was. It stung a little bit, didn't it?
It stung an awful lot on Saturday. It was very, very tough to watch. It wasn't a great performance, unfortunately, but it wasn't even pretty to watch from us. But unfortunately, these things happen. Football is a 46-game season. It's not a one-game season. And if we don't go up, if we don't make the playoffs, it won't be purely because of that game. So we just have to dust ourselves off and move on. And luckily, the current situation means that we get another game very, very quickly.
Yeah, exactly that, Gary. The games are coming thick and fast. It's easy to lose track, isn't it? Are you expecting a bit of a reaction this evening? Because football is often a reactionary sport, if you like, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm certainly expecting a reaction. I would think Michael Appleton is as well, and it's what he's expecting that really matters. I think behind closed doors there will have been some words had. I don't think that Michael is a teacup thrower. I expect to see some sort of reaction in the starting 11 as well. I think that there will be a change of personnel, whether Liam Bridcut comes back or not. But it's a tough game to try and go and give a reaction, because if you get lost in emotion and you get lost in passion against a team like Gillingham, they're the sort of team that will hurt you, because they'll use that against you. So it's going to be a tough one, I think, this evening.
Talking about reactions as well, Gary, it does seem, doesn't it, that social media on the whole is more partisan than ever, whether that's due to the events of the last year, people staying in no matter what happens. We're seeing that with football as well a little bit. And, from an Imps perspective, a couple of fans have been saying that this team is perhaps better off staying in League One as opposed to the Championship. When you read those reactions, I know some people messaged you saying that as well. What were your initial thoughts?
Anger, I think, was my first initial thought, because if promotion comes your way, you take it, whether you're ready or not. There's no such thing as getting promoted too early, because when you get promoted, you have a summer to sign new players. So this team in the current guise would not be the one that would kick off in the Championship were we to be promoted. And that's the same with any team that gets promoted. I also think it was a bit of a defence mechanism for some people as well. People deal with setbacks in different ways. So when some fans have watched the game against Rochdale, they're looking for a consolidation. They're looking for some comfort, and they say, well, we'll be better off staying where we are, to convince them that it's not such a bad thing. Other people just get angry, ignore social media. I think on the whole, social media is the best and worst thing to happen to football and football clubs, frankly.
Is there a difference between passion and stupidity? And I'm not when I say the term stupidity, I'm not in any way, shape or form talking about people saying whether different teams and different clubs are better off in League One or the Championship. I'm just talking overall, because we encourage passion, don't we? And we know that this in particular is a passionate fan base, but at the same time there has to be a level of decorum, doesn't there?
There does, and I think social media unfortunately shines a light on absolutely everybody. And it's the conversations that you see post game are the ones that you might have in the pub or on the way home from the game, where my dad's telling me that 6 or 7 Lincoln players are not good enough, we're not good enough to go up. He doesn't mean it; it's just anger. And when you sit down and you reflect and you look back at some chances, you think, actually, if we'd scored that, the game was different. So you get a little bit more reason, I think. So it is interesting. I think sometimes there are some people that just agitate on social media as well. So they're waiting for the negatives to happen so that it fits their narrative and their ethos. And then unfortunately that gains traction. And I think we see it in society in general. Whenever there are 2 points of view these days, there are 2 completely extreme points of view. It's very hard to find the middle ground, I think. So, like you, I wouldn't want to stray and call it stupidity, but there is an element of, I think, not thinking. There's no thoughtfulness in some comments, and some people have to retract what they say very quickly.
Let's have a look back at Saturday's game against Rochdale then, Gary. You were really impressed in particular with Alex Palmer. He was called upon a few times. We're going to see a solid save from him here. He was one of the shining lights, wasn't he?
He was. There was 1 or 2 that came out of it with some credit. A couple of the saves that Palmer pulled off, I thought was superb. And let me tell you, if we draw that game, his performance is the one that gets the plaudits because it prevents a defeat. The saves he was making were as good as a hat trick in a game that you win. Unfortunately, with him being on the form that he was, it reflected, I think, then badly on the rest of the team because he was called in to make save after save after save. Some were simple, relatively simple like that. But other ones, I thought he really did come to our rescue. I just thought it was particularly disappointing. We defended so poorly. And when a shot like that comes to a crowd of players, it doesn't give your goalkeeper a chance. It really doesn't. And I think actually, if we're going to take any positives, and Sam, I always try and take positives from the negatives. The performance of Alex Palmer's got to be it because he's had a shaky couple of weeks. He's made a couple of little errors, but there was nothing he could do about any of the goals this weekend.
I mean, just looking at some of the football, in fairness to Rochdale, that they played in this game, their position in the league, bottom at the time, you wouldn't have thought it, would you? I mean, we'll come on to that shortly, but what a goal again from Morgan Rogers. How often do we see him pick up the ball in that position, drive forward, and his finishing is absolutely sensational, isn't it?
Yeah, I saw one from Messi at the weekend that looked very similar to that myself. He's a talent. He's a huge talent. And sometimes it's hard to appreciate that talent when you go on and lose the game. But he's coming up with the goods at the moment, really hitting some form. And if we have 9 other outfield players that join him in that sort of form, then there's no reason why we can't pick our promotion push back up. He's a really exciting player. If he's playing anywhere other than the Championship or the Premier League next season, I will be utterly gobsmacked.
Yeah, well, the Imps were without Liam Bridcut in that game, or certainly he didn't start it at least, hoping that he can make a start or certainly be on the bench at least this evening. Let's hear what he had to say talking in his pre-match press conference earlier this week.
Yeah, I feel really good. The physio has been really good with me. Medical team's been brilliant in terms of the work they give me. I'm just dying to get back there and hopefully get back to winning ways.
You mentioned a second ago, it was kind of your first season really where you've picked up some muscle injuries. How frustrating has it been to have picked them up at a crucial stage of the season where there are so many games?
Yeah, it's difficult to take in injuries always, but I think this season is just a bit of a crazy season. I think it's just a case of so many games in a short period of time. Just kind of catches up on you, but I'm not one to dwell and feel sorry for myself. I know it is what it is, and it's just a case of managing it and trying to get over it.
As an injured club captain, how much of a role do you still sort of play from the sidelines?
Yeah, I'm still around the lads every day. Matchdays on there, and just trying to give them that extra bit of experience and knowledge really. But it is difficult, but we're in a kind of a sticky patch at the minute. But for me, it's just trying to keep the lads to a high standard and push them to be as good as they can.
Does that role as an injured club captain sort of differ from the manager's role, or is it similar? What sort of the differences and similarities in the role that you might play when you're injured?
No, I think with the manager, he brought me into the club to have. He's given me a lot of responsibility in terms of being around the lads. A lot of managers wouldn't give you as much responsibility. I think the gaffer wants me to just share my knowledge and try help the lads as much as I can. And that's what I try to do daily. And I'm here to make myself a better player and make others around me just as good.
Yeah, the stats don't lie, do they, Gary? This Lincoln City side are far better when Liam Bridcut starts. The records tell us that. Could you give us an idea of just how he helps improve other players when he's on the pitch? How does he free the likes of Conor McGrandles, James Jones, George Grant, Morgan Rogers, Brennan Johnson? How does he help them?
I think there's more trust from the senior pros when you've got Liam Bridcut sat in front of the back four, if I'm honest. He's quite composed. He certainly helps out the central defensive pairing because they know that if they do make a slip or if somebody does get in behind, more often than not, he's tracking. A little bit further forward, it maybe takes some of the defensive shackles off. For instance, when Brennan Johnson played in midfield, and we were holding with a James Jones or a McGrandles or somebody like that, you felt that sometimes the midfield felt quite stretched and there was lots and lots of gaps because Brennan's very naturally attacking. Whereas I think when Liam Bridcutt plays, he's the sort of intelligent player who understands where the game's going and can fill the space. So he's a little bit like when you spill water, it just moves into the free space. And I think Liam Bridcutt's very much like that. And let's not forget, every time he opens his mouth, he's talking with a decade of experience playing for top football clubs. That commands respect. When he talks, other players are always going to listen, whether they're 16, 17 or 28, 29.
Well, that's a really important point, Gary. He's 31 now, and we know that this is the youngest squad in the division. Again, the stats tell us that the averages show that this Imps side, particularly the one that played against Portsmouth a few months ago, was the youngest of any side put out in the division. It's so imperative when you do have such a young side playing high-profile games like they're doing a lot, that they need a captain figure like that on the pitch.
Yeah, 100%. I think even when you look at our experienced players, you're thinking about the likes of James Jones or Adam Jackson. In terms of Adam Jackson's a little bit older, but he hasn't played all that much football. You look at James Jones, where he's played 250 odd games, but he's only 24, 25 years old. So this is a really young and exciting squad. And I know Alan Hansen once famously said you'll never win anything with kids, but I think at this level, if you've got a good young squad, you're well on your way. You've got to have the heartbeat. You've got to have just that one player perhaps on the pitch that can help control, help just conduct things a little bit. I think I called him a puppet master on the last show, and I still look at it like that. When he gets the ball in front of the back four, he's got everything in his hands, and he can just watch what goes on ahead of him. He's just such a special player. If he's back tonight, it's going to be huge for this football club.
Yeah, we'll find out if he is back in around about 2 minutes' time. Gary, are you expecting any surprises from Michael in his starting 11 this evening?
I wouldn't be shocked if there was changes. I don't think we're going to see the same 11. If Liam Bridcutt comes back in, I would then expect Teo Eden to go back at left back. Ioma and Paul, you can toss a coin for who plays right back. I'm just not so sure as well. I think James Jones has struggled since coming back in. We might see him given a rest. Whether it's Hopper or Morton, who knows? There's a lot of questions to be answered. And that's one exciting thing about this Lincoln team. You've never been able to predict the starting 11, not accurately, because we've got decent players and they're just coming back to fitness now as well. So it's going to be an interesting selection this evening.
Going to be speaking to a Gillingham fan later on in the show. In the meantime, Gary, what are you expecting from Steve Evans's Gillingham this evening then?
Well, without a doubt, they're going to be direct. They've won more aerial duels, or they've been involved in more aerial duels than any team in this division by more than 100, more than Northampton, more than teams that do go back to front quickly. They're going to look to land it on the head of Verdane Oliver, who is very much a player I likened earlier, to John Fashanu or Mick Harford. His elbows, he's strong, it sticks to him. Lots of second balls to be won. We've not been doing that as well recently. But they're going to look to get it, sort of bounce it off Oliver and then pick it up. They've got some good players. Kyle Dempsey, they've got Conor Ogilvie, they've got Jordan Graham. These are footballers that would walk into 90% of other League One sides as well. So let's not earmark them purely as a long ball side. Yes, they go back to front very quickly, as we did under Danny and Nicky Cowley. But when the ball's down in the final third, Jordan Graham, I think, delivers as many crosses as anybody has this season. But they're susceptible at the back. So I can see it being quite an open game of football, I think. Lots of counter-attacks from Lincoln, lots of fast passing from Gillingham.
Interesting stuff, Gary. Right, the clock has just struck 6 o'clock, which means we can get tonight's Lincoln City starting 11 with Alan Long, who's pitch side.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Welcome to pitch side here at the LNER Stadium. I can tell you that there are a couple of changes. In come Tom Hopper and Liam Bridcutt, and dropping to the bench, it's Cohen Bramall and James Jones. So the full lineup: number 1, Alex Palmer; 2, Regan Paul; 4, Lewis Monsmer; 5, Adam Jackson; 7, Teo Eden; 9, Tom Hopper; 18, Conor McGrandles; 19, Callum Morton; 20, Brennan Johnson; at 23, Liam Bridcutt; and Morgan Rogers is at 27. On the bench, 31, Sam Long; number 8, James Jones; number 11, Anthony Scully; 14, Theo Archibald; 15, Cohen Bramall; 17, Remy Howarth; and 22, TJ Ioma. So the starting lineup, once again: Alex Palmer, Regan Paul, Lewis Monsmer, Adam Jackson, Teo Eden, Tom Hopper, Conor McGrandles, Callum Morton, Brennan Johnson, Liam Bridcutt and Morgan Rogers. With that, back to you in the studio.
Thanks very much indeed, Al. Yeah, that is your Lincoln City starting 11. And the big news, or two pieces of big news. The first being that the captain, Liam Bridcut, returns to the starting 11. That's massive for Michael Appleton this evening. Not only that, but Tom Hopper and Callum Morton start up front together for the first time in this season then. Palmer, Poole, Jackson, Monsma, Eden, the aforementioned Bridcut, McGrandles, Johnson, Rogers, Hopper, and Morton. Gary, we've talked about Liam Bridcut over the last sort of 10 minutes or so. So I'm going to ask you about Tom Hopper and Callum Morton starting up front together. Obvious question as it may be, does this mean that Michael's playing a 4-4-2 this evening?
Not necessarily. I would see that potentially Brennan Johnson in the midfield with Conor McGrandles, Rogers on the left, potentially Morton on the right. I think he played on the right earlier in the season before he was injured. I seem to remember him either coming on the right or playing there from the start. But it does mean that we could also go 4-4-2 as well. It's a very, very attacking formation, isn't it? When you think on the bench, Archibald Howarth, Anthony Scully, who's got 12, 13 goals this season as well. So there's lots and lots of options. We're going for it tonight. That's what that team suggests to me. It's go for broke. We get a result tonight. We're still in that automatic promotion hunt. We failed to get a result tonight, and it's looking more like a fight for the playoffs. Michael's going for it. He's rolled the dice. As
a Lincoln City fan, these are the statements you want to see from your manager, aren't they? You know, you lose a couple of games or you go on a slightly poor run, and then a manager comes out and he just says, right, we've got the quality to win this. Let's make it almost as attacking as possible. And sometimes it can come back to bite you, and other times it'll work. But we want to see attacking football at least.
We do, but we thought we were going to get that on Saturday. Remember, we had a very young and vibrant attack in Rogers, Johnson and Morton, and it just didn't work. So, you know, these are the risks that a manager has to take, and he gets judged on how they come, how it turns out, and there's no guarantees that it will work or it won't. What I will say is that Michael's not afraid to try things from the off, which I really like. I also think there's a trust in all of his players. I think how quickly we've seen Callum Morton come back into the side shows you exactly how much Michael trusts the 11 that have started. So it's interesting. We do need a reaction tonight. We've certainly got one from the manager in terms of team selection. Will we now get one from the 11 players that have been entrusted with beating Gillingham?
It's the big question, isn't it, Gary? We'll get more reaction from Gary Hutchinson with regards to Michael Appleton's starting 11 later on in the show. In the meantime, delighted to say that Sean Rowan joins us live now. Sean, lovely to see you. How are you settling in then, I guess, is the first question. How are you finding your first season as part of a first team player?
Yeah, it's good and difficult at the same time. Like, good in the way the training's up to scratch every day. Like the way Liam and all the experienced players, they demand off everyone, like every day, like in the gym, outside, and it's been difficult because obviously let's just haven't been in the squad or haven't been playing that often as I would have wished. But I'm only 17 or gone 18, and it's my first year as a professional, so we just have to wait, and when my time comes again, then just take it.
Well, that's it, isn't it? It is about being patient. I know you've made 11 appearances so far, which for a 17-year-old at this level is not bad going at all, isn't it? But you alluded to it there. It's just about reminding yourself, I guess, how young you are, and that all this is, you know, to benefit you going forward, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. Like I haven't, like I remember the last 2 or 3 games that I played, I didn't play particularly well, and I understand why I was out of the team, and that's how brutal football is at the end of the day. If you don't play well or you're not performing, no matter what age you are, you're going to be out. And that shows what the gaffer's like as a person. Like if you're not performing, then he's not afraid to take you out.
You've played in plenty of good games, plenty of big games so far this season. Which ones stand out for you?
Probably the game against Charlton, I'd say. Just as a team, what we played very well, and against the big side coming down from the champ, that we showed them what we're like and what we could do for the rest of the season. So I think that's probably the best game.
And you've had an international call up as well. I mean, what does it mean to you to be called up to your country? I know obviously it's under 17s level, but still, I mean, it just must mean so much when the call comes through to represent your country?
Yeah, overwhelming. Like, it's, as a young kid, it's anyone's dream to play for the country. And for me, I've had setbacks of not being picked for under 15s, under 16s due to just like not being at the right club or all that kind of stuff. And then to be called up to the under 17s, to be given a chance by the manager was unbelievable. And to play against Switzerland in that time and play 90 minutes and draw 1-1 was it was something that I've always dreamt of, and now I just have to keep on kicking on, and hopefully I can get into the under 21 soon or under 19s when it's back up and running.
The city of Lincoln's been a quiet place over the last year or so, hasn't it? But despite that, does it still feel like it's a bit of a home from home over here now?
Yeah, it does. Like, I've been over here nearly 2 years now, and it's basically just reality. Like, you're playing football like 4 times out of like 7 days, so like it's kind of just normal. And then if you're away with the squad overnight, it's basically like the same as what I would be back in Ireland, because there's nothing back open or anything. It's just like you go to the shops, you train, and it's like, for me it's the same, I think, bar like if you're going out with your friends or anything.
Now, you're in the squad for a big game on Friday at the LNER Stadium, the FA Youth Cup 4th round against Watford. Tell us about it, because, at that level, the FA Youth Cup is no doubt the biggest domestic competition there is.
Yeah, it's just coming together as a team, and all of us are humble and have the desire to want to win and make more history for Lincoln as a club and as an under 18 and individually, because as you might be aware that we haven't made it past the 4th round. I don't think we've made it past the 3rd round, but we're in the 4th round now against Watford, and if we win, it's an achievement. But just going into it as what we want to play and how we play, and hopefully we'll get the result.
Are you feeling confident ahead of it?
Yeah, of course. You always have to feel confident going into a game.
That's what we like, Sean. Lovely to see you. Thanks very much for your time.
No problem. Thank you.
Lovely to speak to Sean Rowan there. And Gary, I'll bring you back into the conversation then. I thought it was most interesting. You ask a player, how are you finding it? There's nothing wrong with a bit of honesty. He wants to be playing. He wants to be in that first team squad, and he wants to be starting at the end of the day. You can't blame him, can you? But he does have to remind himself he's still a young player and his time will come.
I had to remind myself he's still a young player when I listen to him and look at him, because he already looks very, very much a man, very thick set, very kind of matter of fact, and I like that. He's going to be a big player, I think, in his career, whether it's at this football club or at a higher level. So yeah, you do like the honesty. Even at 17, 18, he hasn't played as much as he'd like. He seems very determined, very single-minded, very dogged. I mean, I noticed a little wry smile when you said, are you feeling confident? He's always feeling confident. You've got to feel confident. I think if you're 17, 18 years old, you've got a professional deal, you're playing for a club like Lincoln City, that's a real bonus. I don't think there's very much will phase that young man at all when he does finally migrate to the first team proper.
Well, I think Michael was asked about him a few months ago, wasn't he, when he started him ahead of perhaps the Shrewsbury game, and he said, what are the reasons for starting Sean? He said one of the key ones, other than the fact that he's a very good footballer indeed, is his mentality, and it's just such a big part of the game now, isn't it? If you can be brought up on a solid mentality, a winning, confident yet level-headed mentality, you're halfway there, aren't you?
You are, yeah. Mentality is sort of like you say, you're halfway there if you've got the right attitude and the right application. And I think we've seen some average footballers at the club in the past who have got absolutely everywhere through mentality. I mean, without wanting to sound detrimental to him, Jake Sheridan springs to mind, who arguably probably wasn't at the level we were, but he played week in, week out, because that boy just he was just on it. He understood it. He got it. And I think with Sean Rowan, we've got a great mixture, because we've got a very talented young man. Let's not forget that. And they had a great sort of opening few games of the season. He exploded onto the scene. I actually think his recent omission is as much to do with building his mentality as anything. I think Michael has just put the brakes on things a little bit. I mean, people were getting carried away, like me, talking about first £1 million footballer, this, that, and the other. I think Michael's just gone, tell you what, let's just slow it down now. We'll bring him back out of the firing line for a little bit, put him back into the youth setup. We'll keep him around the first team. Next season, I expect to see him kick on massively.
You're a football fan. You're allowed to get carried away, Gary. Let's now get the thoughts of the aforementioned manager then, Michael Appleton. This is what he had to say in his pre-match press conference yesterday.
Not too long. I think it, like anything, I think you should never sort of try and brush it under the carpet. It'll be more of things that we can be better, that we didn't do well on Saturday, and how we can sort of bring it into the game tomorrow night. So, you know, obviously, clearly a lot of that will be what I've just mentioned there about being competitive. Me realising that it's going to be unrealistic for me to expect us to win more aerial duels and contacts than the opposition, because that's what they're really good at. But what I can ask is that we can get as close to as 50% of that as possible and try and win as many second balls as we possibly can. And if we do that, then I just think we've got the quality to win the game.
Are you expecting a bit of an onslaught early on from them? They'll try and take advantage of obviously the disappointment of Saturday?
I'm expecting an onslaught for 95 minutes, to be honest. And to be fair, that's what we got at their place. Yet we won the game 3-0 and probably should have won the game 5-0. So it's just that, you know, little bits of details. You know, they put it on us at their place consistently for the full, like I say, 95 minutes or so. And we dealt with it really, really well. There wasn't many opportunities that they had. I think Big John come on and hit the bar with an header. But apart from that and another snapshot, they never really had an opportunity in the game. So we're going to have to have that type of game where we're really solid. And then when we win the ball back, we have to be really clean and look to break very, very, very quick.
Yeah, the manager, Michael Appleton's pre-match thoughts then. Let's just run you through the Lincoln City starting 11 if you're only just joining us now. The big news being that the captain, Liam Bridcut, starts for the Imps tonight, and Tom Hopper and Callum Morton play up front together for the first time so far this season. That's depending if it is a 4-4-2 this evening. Of course, we'll wait to see or wait to hear from that when Michael puts his team out at 7 o'clock this evening. In full, Alex Palmer, Regan Poole, Adam Jackson, Lewis Monsmith, Teo Eden, the captain, Liam Bridcut, Conor McGrandles, Brennan Johnson, Morgan Rogers, Tom Hopper, Callum Morton, and on the bench it is Long, Jones, Scully, Archibald, Bramall, Howarth, and Ioma. So Gary, Teo Eden back at left back then. He's been taken out of the central midfield role because Liam Bridcut's back in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I thought he played well against Crewe, but then everybody did. You win 3-0. Most players play well. Had a decent first half against Ipswich. I think after that, he began just to look like he was struggling a little bit in that 4 role. And again, I see Teo as a central midfielder, potentially as part of the 2 a little bit further forward. So whilst that might be his favoured position, and he might have been the best option at the time, he's never going to keep his place in there over Liam Bridcut. Nobody is. So it makes natural sense for him to go at left back again. Cohen Bramall was taken off at half time, wasn't he, and struggled a little bit. I think Teo has been one of our most improved players in the left back position since the beginning of the season. He's really grown into it. He's quite neat, he's quite tricky, and if he does lose the ball when he's a little bit further forward, you've got Liam Bridcut who can instantly move outside and pick it up. And Teo does occasionally lose the ball. He's a kind of close control player, isn't he? So I like the fact he's gone back in at left back. I think he's our best option there, and it gives the defence a little bit more stability, I hope.
In terms of other key talking points from the starting 11 then, or I should say, and you alluded to it around about 6:05, Gary, the strength and depth of the bench now. It's about as an attacking bench as we've had all season.
It is, absolutely. There was a time where we were talking about having such a defensive bench, and now you've got young Sean Rowan not on it, and we've got some real attacking options. We've got Remy Howarth, who, if we are going 4-4-2, is likely to be the additional striker who may come on later in the game. We've got Theo Archibald, who, he's really unlucky at the moment because he's being kept out of the side by Morgan Rogers, a £4 million teenager. So I really like Theo. I think he's somebody that can come on and affect a game. And then you've got Anthony Scully. He scored as many goals from open play, or more goals from open play, I think, than any other player on our side, and he doesn't get in. And what he does, he'll sit out on the right wing. He tends to like the channel. He likes to get his fullback overlapping. He's not afraid to shoot as well. So lots of options should we need to change it around 60 minutes. We've actually made the second fewest amount of substitutions this season than any team in the division. So Michael does seem a little reticent to make wholesale changes unless things are going badly. My hope is on 60 minutes today, he doesn't need to make wholesale changes.
Interesting stuff indeed, Garrett. We'll be getting the thoughts of a Gillingham Town fan very shortly. Before then, let's remind ourselves what happened when the two sides met around about 6 weeks ago in the league. These are the best of the action.
Don't try to run a mile with bricks strapped to your feet. Don't follow orders from the ones you're trying to be. But you in on broken glass and you spit it out to sea. How far you think you are from the secrets that you see? And I told you said I had to go. And I'm taking all out because we know. Well, you know you're better on your own. And it's time you want to know, 'cause you're so much better on your Your time is yet to come, stop holding out for no. There's a fine line you walk upon while you're not really sure. The sun shining up all night, you've nothing left to give. You put a peace sign into the sky, still got time to live. But I told you said I had to go. When I'm taking all I have because we know. Well, you know you're better on your own. And it's time you want to know, 'cause you're so much better on your
Yes, I did just call tonight's opponents Gillingham Town. Yes, that was an error for me. And yes, I am disgraceful. I apologise. And I also apologise to our next guest, Matt, from Gills in the Blood, who joins us now. Matt, I'm sure if I didn't pull myself up on it just then, you were about to, weren't you?
I was, Twitter was at the ready. You was just about to get an abusive message, yes.
Well, I'm glad I dodged that.
did.
Matt, I believe your players drove to Swindon the other day. I'm
did.
guessing the LNER is probably a step too far from that point of view this evening.
I would imagine, yeah, the distance has probably put paid to that. So I'd imagine they're on a coach today at some point or yesterday. I'm not entirely sure when we travelled up. But yeah, it seems that a couple of times this season when we've had games that are within a closer proximity, the lads have car shared or whatever or gone individually to save costs for the club. And we've won at Charlton and we've won at Swindon doing it. So I suppose there's a case to say we should do it for every away game. But obviously when it's at the other end of the country, it's a little trickier.
Yeah, your side are banging form, aren't they? I mean, do you go into this one with renewed hope, with an extra bit of confidence? Because if we go back to that game, you know, at Priestfields a few weeks ago, it looks a very different game to what it could potentially look this evening, certainly from your point of view.
Yeah, I think so. I suppose that you look at the comparative forms at the time and we were still a bit in and out and we were still trying to bed in those new players that had come in during the January transfer window. We had a bit of a reshuffle and the window was generally pretty good to us. And we've been a bit more consistent in terms of selection. We've been a bit more consistent in terms of performances. There's still the odd one that's disappointing, the likes of Wimbledon and Fleetwood. We've been done by soft goals. We've lost to good sides like Lincoln and Peterborough in that time as well. But I'll go back to the fixture at the Priestfield. It was live on Sky, and I think it's one of them where we was trying to get on top and trying to get back into the game at 1-0, and unfortunately I'll call it a soft penalty. I won't go as far as saying he dived, but he did dive. But he unfortunately had a massive say on the game. And for me, it wasn't a pen. And then obviously when you're chasing the game against a side who's good as Lincoln are, you're going to leave yourselves open. And we got picked off again a little while after. But I thought 3-0 certainly flattered the Imps.
You're allowed your opinions, Matt. That's what football's all about. We've got your starting 11 this evening. I don't know if you yourself have had a chance to have a look at it. Yeah, it's Bonham, Jackson, Tucker, Cundy, O'Gilvy, O'Keefe, Dempsey, McDonald, Graham, Akinde and Oliver. So let's start with John Akinde then, who starts up front for your side against his old side this evening.
That's it, yeah. I'm not surprised that John comes into the team. He's been decent off the bench in the last couple, and he's probably been a little bit harshly dropped out the starting 11. He's probably not scored enough goals. I've said that plenty of times since arriving January 2020. He's got 8 since then. He's got 7 this season, but I think he's having a decent enough campaign considering he's been in and out of the starting 11. He's had to come off the bench a few times. I think he's hit the bar twice. He's hit the post once. So if they go in, suddenly he's in double figures and it looks like he's having a very good campaign. But I'm still confident John will get to 10 this season, which I don't think would be a poor return. And obviously he's up front tonight alongside another big fella, which is for Dane Oliver, who's in absolutely scintillating form at the moment. He's got 2 doubles in his last 4 games. He's got 6 in his last 5 overall, up to 14 for the season in all competitions. And they'll cause you a threat, I'd imagine, if we can get on the front foot. Everyone knows how we play. We'll be direct. We'll try and hit them early, and then we'll get the likes of Carl Dempsey and Jordan Graham and Alex McDonald hopefully running in behind off of any link play and any flick-ons and work from there. It'll be a slightly different approach to how you approach it, I imagine. But yeah, it looks a strong 11. A couple of changes from the weekend victory, and I think those 2 that have come in, which is John Akinde and Alex McDonald, probably deserve that start based on what they've done from the bench in the last 2 games.
I think Gary's got a question for you.
No problem.
Hello,
How are you? Good.
Yeah, we're always well, mate. Thank you. And it wasn't a penalty. You're quite right, but that's football. Alex McDonald, you've mentioned him there. I'm really interested in him because I thought he very much a League 2 player at one point. Mike Clapperton speaks really highly of him. He was his first signing at Oxford as well. What does he bring to the team? Not just does he bring sort of character, not just what he does on the field as well?
Yeah, I think he's one of them that's pretty vocal. He's a bit more experienced in the dressing room, being 30, 31 now. So, and we've got quite a lot of youngsters, the likes of Jack Tucker, Robbie Cundy, Callum Slattery before he got injured. So I think he's been great in terms of morale in the dressing room, on the training pitch. But he's a decent player as well. He's not going to pull up trees. He's not your Jordan Grahams or your Morgan Rogers or them types of players. But what you do is he'll come in, he'll play anywhere that you ask him to, whether that's from the side of the diamond from tonight if we go 4-4-2 diamond, or he'll go wide left if we play a flat 4-4-2. He works incredibly hard off the ball and he's decent enough with it. He's another one that's probably not scored enough goals, but like John Akinde, he's not been in the team consistently, so he's constantly having to try and force his way into the side, which is difficult when your team's playing well, which is what we've been doing over the last couple of months. And aside from the odd couple of ones, like I mentioned, the likes of Fleetwood and Wimbledon, the only other 2 defeats in that time are to 2 of the best sides that I've seen us play this season, and that's yourselves and Posh. But Alex McDonald will work incredibly hard off the ball, and if he gets time and space on it, he's decent enough with it. And I think he stepped up absolutely fine. There's a few of our fans that don't rate him, but I think some people tend to just look at the bare stats and think, oh, he's not scored any goals. He's only got a couple of assists. Well, he's got 1 goal, sorry. But he brings a lot more to it than that. And it's like the John Akinde thing as well. You've got to look at beyond the statistics. He's only got 7 goals, but I think he's got 7 assists if you include penalties that he's won that we've converted as well. And he does a lot of stuff off the ball that sometimes goes a bit unnoticed. And I think both of them can have a positive impact tonight. And I think especially John will be obviously trying to prove a point against his former employers.
Matt, let's talk about Steve Evans then. He's been playing the old press conference pre-match mind games again, hasn't he? He likes to attempt to rile up the Imps fans, obviously being a former Boston United manager as well. What's the relationship like between yourselves as fans and the manager, Steve Evans?
I didn't want him. I didn't want him when it was announced that he was coming in. I thought, number one, there's history with Steve Evans, full stop, as a character. There's history with Steve Evans against Gillingham, going back, in the last 10 years. But what I said was if he was going to be our manager, I wanted him to come in, make us harder to beat, which we wasn't. We was too easy to play against. I wanted him to make us win more football matches. I wanted him to make me look forward to Saturday or Tuesday a bit more, which he has done. And the fact that we're sitting here with 11 games to go with an outside shot at the playoffs tells you all you need to know about the job that he's doing. And I know he talks a lot about budgets and we don't have one and everyone else spends billions and billions. firmly in cheek with that comment, but we do have a small budget. We can't run to, the squads that we see at the teams at the top of the table. Whether you're spending as much as he tries to imply in these press conferences, like you say, it's probably a little bit of mind games to try and get under the skin of the opposition. But what good manager doesn't do that? And I think we're punching well above our weight at the moment, considering, well, tonight we've only got 6 substitutes, so that tells you all you need to know about us. We've got a couple of injuries, 3 or 4 missing, so we can't even fill a bench, and that's the numbers we've been running with during Steve Evans' tenure as a whole, and we've been absolutely brilliant on the whole. Like I say, we've probably been a little bit inconsistent start of the season, and that's cost us in terms of the playoffs, and I still think that it is a long shot. But if we could get a positive result tonight, then we've got Doncaster at home at the weekend, and if we can get something against them, then, the belief starts coming, and momentum's a massive thing, especially at this stage of the season. But I've been won round by Steve Evans, and I'm big enough to admit that. He still has his moments. I think he's had more cautions this season than any of our players. But he's not going to change, and he's been successful doing that for the last 20 years as a manager, and he's not going to change his methods for anybody. And I think it becomes a little bit more emphasised because there's no fans in stadium, so you can hear everything a little bit more. But he's no angel, but there's plenty of managers up and down the country that are not angels either.
Matt, just finally then, in a word, what's your score prediction this evening?
1-1. John Akindi to score for us.
Okay, interesting stuff. Matt, lovely to have you on the show, and thanks very much for not leaving when I called yourselves Gillingham Town. Much appreciated.
No problem at all. Take care, gents. Thank you.
Cheers, Matt.
Bye-bye.
Great to speak to Matt, the Gillingham fan from Gills in the Blood TV. Certainly knows his stuff, doesn't he? As you would expect, but speaks really well, and interesting to hear that he thinks that John Akinde will score against his former side this evening. Gary, we've got about 3 minutes left of the show. Race through it as per usual. Let's look ahead to some League One games this evening then. And where do you want to start? Charlton versus Bristol Rovers, an interesting one because Lee Bowyer left the club yesterday.
Yeah, it is. Charlton's still on the cusp of the playoffs as well, aren't they? So they need a decent result there. You've got Bristol Rovers who experiencing a little bit of a resurgence under Joey Barton. I think if Charlton don't get a result there, it's going to look like an uphill struggle for them. They'll only have 10 games left. I know there's bigger games there on the fixture list, but that one jumps out at me as absolutely fascinating because at this stage of the season, some games are season ending for some teams. I think we're getting to that stage now.
One of the big games that you mentioned there, or certainly one of the bigger games than perhaps that one, is Peterborough versus Portsmouth this evening. Probably one of the biggest games in the division, 2nd versus 7th. How do you see it playing out? Because Portsmouth, like Charlton, lost their manager this week.
Yeah, if you'd asked me 2 weeks ago, I would have backed Peterborough all the way, all the time. I think with Kenny Jackett going, I think the shackles might be off for 1 or 2 Portsmouth players. I think some of his football was relatively negative, and I think with the players that they'd got, the Marcus Harness, the Ronan Curtis, the John Marquis, you expect those to kind of go and attack. When we played them, they didn't. They were poor. They went in their shell despite when they had the man sent off. I just wonder if maybe with a caretaker in charge, you might see a more energised, a more sort of forward-thinking Portsmouth. And if they do, alongside the fact that Peterborough have lost Sammy Smodic to injury this week, there could be a surprise there. From our point of view, really, if we're looking at solidifying top 6, we could do with Portsmouth getting beat, and let Peterborough sort of have the points. But I think that'll be a draw tonight.
Accrington versus Sunderland is tomorrow night, Gary. At some stage, Sunderland have to lose a game, don't they? Because they're absolutely banging form at the moment. We certainly hope that they lose the game on Saturday. But do you think Accrington can get anything tomorrow night?
I think Accrington can always get something, depending on which Accrington turn up. I mean, this is a fallen away almost certainly from the playoffs now, which I think we predicted on Matchday Live some time ago. I think with Sunderland, actually, if they're likely to lose points, it's going to be Saturday, because playing on Sunday and then on a Wednesday, they've only then got Thursday, Friday to turn it around to play for us. So there's, it's a lack of preparation time. Are the players going to be fit? Are they going to be able to put what we would class the full first team out? Will Charlie Wyke and Aidan McGeady make 3 games in a week? So I think that probably is a game that Sunderland can win, but they'll certainly soften them up for us on Saturday. And let's face it, the outcome tonight hugely important for us. But if we take something from tonight's game and then we're to take something from the stadium as well, 4 points from those 2 games will put us bang back in contention.
Well, let's have a lock at the Imps' next 5 fixtures then, Gary. We say it all the time, don't we, that the next 5 are probably the biggest 5 of this season. But when you look at these, Sunderland away, Oxford away, MK Dons at home, Charlton away and Blackpool home, it's hard to argue against this 5 being the most key so far this season, is it not?
Yeah, when the final whistle goes against Blackpool, we'll know whether we're automatic promotion candidates, playoff candidates or no candidates. And when you look at that side, I picked Oxford and Charlton and Blackpool as playoff candidates this season. I think they're all teams that have got it in their locker to be better than they have been. I think when you look at Oxford and Blackpool, their form has been really good of late. Carl Robinson, very wily manager at Oxford, he's got a decent side there. Blackpool absolutely flying. My only regret from a kind of a pundit point of view is that I called it at the beginning of the season, and it took Neil Critchley some time to settle in and find his team there. I've talked about 3 really tough games. You've got Sunderland, who were a Premier League team when we were winning the National League, coming up first, and then MK Dons. It's not an easy game. MK Dons made some really astute signings in the transfer window. Very dangerous side, the likes of Will Grigg, very, very strong, can score goals. They're 5 very, very tough games. If we were to take 10 points from those, I would be absolutely ecstatic.
Gary, you've not got many things wrong so far this season. You did, though, get the score wrong at the weekend, but we can't blame you because it was a surprising one. How do you see tonight going?
I think it's going to be very, very tough. I think with Liam Bridcut back in, we'll be good enough not to get beat. I'm going to go with Matt, actually. I think that it will be a 1-1 draw tonight. I think Gillingham are a very tough side to beat when they want to be. And Steve Evans will want to be against Lincoln. John Akindi will want to be. But Dane Oliver will want to be. So 1-1 for me. I'll go with John Akindi scoring a goal as well. I'll piggyback on Matt's prediction. So and Conor McGrandles for us, or at least I hope so anyway, because that's what I put money on.
There we go. That's what you put money on. And Gary Hutchinson, much appreciate your time as ever. Myself and Gary will be back at the usual time at 1:30 on Saturday afternoon when the Imps take on Sunderland. In the meantime, you can get your match pass now by going to www.weareimps.com/ifollow. Do enjoy the game, and let's hope the Imps can return to winning ways. We'll see you later.